Presentation tonight or today for you guys, using data to manage human capital through a crisis. I think it's fairly safe to say that the current COVID-19 pandemic is one of those crises that data can help all organizations manage their human capital. And today, I want to take you through a short journey from an HR perspective. So as Eduardo said, you know, I am responsible for this aspect within Qlik. So I want to kind of take a step back and walk through a journey that I've been on that leads me to today. Before I do that, I just want to give you an idea, because many of your HR customers are not typically people analytic friendly just yet. And I think this demonstrates really clearly that people end up doing jobs that are outside of a career. And we should be cognizant that we all need a little help sometimes in getting up and running. And I think, Eduardo, your comments at the beginning there were very, very relevant, because if we just give HR department a license for QlikSense, they're not going to do much with it. If we give them a license and an app that they can plug some data in easily, that's going to really change the game for them. So I've been at Qlik for 6 years. Eduardo and I had the pleasure of meeting each other at about that sort of time. We started and we're on the same induction course. So it's a double pleasure to have contact with him just now. And my background, my career has been built in recruitment. So predominantly within either tech or finance. And I joined Qlik actually in the recruitment department. And my previous role, in fact, before today, was to lead their global recruitment team. Now I am responsible for all HR data at Qlik, not just how we collect it, but also how we store it and how we use it. And that means not only do I drive the people analytics strategy, I also have control and governance over the data that we put into our people analytics applications. And I know that gives me quite a privileged position, because many of the people that you speak to, either in analytics departments or in HR departments, don't necessarily have the luxury of controlling both the analytic piece and the data being provided. And it does give me an advantage. So if you can find people like me in other businesses, you'll be doing really well. Typically though, where HR are concerned, they know that they need to use the data, but they're not always familiar with the way that they need to govern and prepare the data for people analytics. So again, just a pointer, if you're speaking with HR people, that's likely to be a good touch point for them. Okay. Just putting up a legal disclaimer now as we move into some of the slides that I've prepared for you. The basic context here is that what you're about to see is a complete mix of data. Some of it is real, some of it I have anonymized, and some of it is completely fake. I'm not going to tell you which is what. So please, whatever you do, don't draw any conclusions to any of the data that you're seeing represented in the visualizations on the next slides. So welcome to the age of HR tech. There are 5 key areas that I believe tech is influencing the direction and the speed of HR functions. We are being touched at every level by technology around us. From a transformational perspective, the communications that we can now achieve in HR far surpass anything that we've been used to, certainly even in the career span that I've had. We all have mobile devices. Not only are they connected or connecting us from a voice perspective, but more predominantly from a data perspective. And that, again, isn't just being able to access the internet. That is applications that run on these mobile devices. Our human capital management system, Workday, has its own app. Many of you will be familiar with other applicant tracking systems, human capital systems that also have apps built into iOS or Android software, allowing companies to communicate in new and innovative ways with all of their employees, not just when they're sitting at a desk in front of a laptop, but also when they're out and about. And I think it's really important. We take this for granted in pretty much every aspect of our lives. I don't think that we are there quite yet from an HR perspective. But it's certainly something that is becoming much, much more prevalent. We also see tech in the recruitment space, augmenting the recruitment processes. So predominantly, we see a lot of technology being deployed and algorithms examining CVs and applicants as they arrive into your vacancies, with the hope that these algorithms, these augmented intelligent systems, are going to be able to produce for you the 10 best or the 5 best candidates that you have received for any particular position. We need to be very careful with these. For those of you who stay connected, the algorithms that people use and are extremely sensitive. And you need to be very aware of kind of gender bias and all of those sorts of things as you implement. There have been some pretty high profile cases where even the algorithms have been producing a gender bias. We also see a lot of HR tech driving process efficiency. There is no surprise there. Technology in general is proving to be extremely useful in providing efficiencies to every department of all businesses. And HR is no different. So where we see automations, where we see workflows, tech is really providing the ability to be able to drive an efficiency. And this, again, when you speak to your customers, is extremely important. HR is a cost center for every business. We don't necessarily develop or produce revenue ourselves. And typically all of those corporate departments are being squeezed as companies strive to be more efficient from a cost perspective to drive that profitability. So any tech that can help us drive these efficiencies is going to be very welcome. We've also seen a huge increase in the need for security and governance of PII, so personally identifiable information. This started with GDPR and has continued on with other, other countries developing outside of Europe, other countries developing security and governance ruling, and this does cause global businesses a headache, and any technology that can help support and underpin those security and governance models is very, very welcome. And the last one here is the collection of data. So we're all familiar with tools like SurveyMonkey and some of the online data collection tools. The storage and the use of that data for decisioning is where we now see reporting and latterly reporting turning into analytics. So we have always supported decisions with the data that we can collect. I think the difference now is the way that we can serve that information back to the business and use it for the decision making. We really truly have an opportunity to drive business value in this area specifically. And that's why I want to take a look at it in a little more detail. And this is kind of the beginning of our journey here. If I think back even a few years ago, even during my time at Qlik, what I think to HR reporting looks like the left-hand side of this slide. And the generation of this series of Excel files happens something like this. I have a manager stakeholder. He comes to me and he says, Tom, it'd be great if you could just run me a quick report that says, these are the people in my team.
Okay.
And I say, sure. So we go into Workday, we pull a report out, we export it to Excel, we send it to the leader. You don't hear anything for a couple of days, and he comes back and he says, yeah, that report was really good, but what I'd like to add to that now is XYZ information. So you go back, you regenerate that report, you add the additional fields, you pull it out, you pop it into Excel, you send it back to your stakeholder, and here he is, he's got the information that he needs. So you're feeling good now. A couple of hours later, thank you, yep, I've got that. And actually, I've been speaking with a couple of my peers, and could you do the same report for them? So you go back, you pull that same report out, you add those extra fields of information to pull in the data from a couple of other people, you send it out to all three stakeholders. Those three stakeholders now have opinions on the data that you've sent to them, and they all come back to you and say, it'd be great if you could add something else. I'm exaggerating the point, but I'm sure you understand. This is the iterative process that we have been through to generate reports for decision making in the past. It's all been driven out of Excel. And for people in HR, this is a very, very familiar story. What we're looking at now and the way that analytics is changing that is on the right-hand side of this slide. So instead of pulling out reports, what we've got here are dashboards and visualizations that certainly in Qlik we can explore, start asking those questions, and we can alter in real time. We can add those fields, we can add managers, we can take them away, and we can produce something in front of and with our stakeholders in real time. You don't need to go back to your system and pull it out and wait for it to bake and everything else. It is just there. It's an always on opportunity for us to explore the data that we hold about our human capital. The next part is to think, okay, so again on the left, this is a typical view of HR data. So at Qlik, in the center there, we have a QlikSense server, and to that server we can add data from a number of different HR systems. Workday predominantly, you'll probably recognize as our human capital management system. JobVite, less well known, but for those of you who do know it, it's an applicant tracking system. And we basically use that at Qlik to run our recruiting department. The other two systems here, so FormStack is, you can view that as SurveyMonkey. It's a data collection tool. It's a smart form system that you can use, and it adapts to the user and the request. And Globalforce on the left there is the system that we use for our talent conversations and recognition programs. These all sit within the HR sphere. And typically when you talk to your HR departments, these are the kinds of systems that they think provide all their HR data. What I want to evangelize and what I always talk about is actually no. Your HR data is far broader than that, because every member of every company is producing data every day in different systems by their behaviors, by their transactions, and just by their being there. There are ways and views that we can take the employee population and examine it for patterns and whatever else you need to do. And so what I'm trying to show on the right-hand side is it kind of where we've taken our people analytics function within Qlik. So we don't confine ourselves to just using the standard HR applications. We actually bring data in from Qlik GeoAnalytics to be able to map people to their zip codes. We bring data in from Exactly. That's the system we use for our sales compensation plans. ServiceNow, we use data in ServiceNow not only to measure the use cases or the questions coming in from our employees about culture and talent issues, but also IT issues. Now we can feed that into our people analytics. We understand what populations need by country. So we can start to address and be able to service them in a different way. Salesforce, you're all probably familiar with the sales app. We bring data in via REST connection, via APIs, via CSV files on an automated basis. And Host Analytics is our finance system. And we bring in some data to be able to slice our employee population up in the same way as finance do, which means that people analytics in Qlik actually mirrors how we report out to our board of directors as well. And that has been a true game changer when we can show our board and our executive team the same view of our employees from a culture and talent or from an HR perspective as we do finance. It begins now to gel in a much more cohesive way. So taking all of those aspects, what next? What about managing people in a crisis? So this is where we started from our current COVID response apps. Some time ago, I'm sure many of you will remember, it's like 3 or 4 years ago, there were a number of terrorist events around the world. There were big forest fires in California. There were a number of severe weather events that happened across the northern parts of America, typhoons, hurricanes, everything else. And the one question that I kept being asked was, can I get a report of the people living in X place? Because we need to contact them and make sure that they're okay. The whole process went through exactly that same iterative steps that we talked about before. So we've got, for example, a weather event in or affecting our King of Prussia head office. So the request comes in. Can I get a list of all the people living in Pennsylvania? Sure. So I send a list of all the people living in Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, not all of our King of Prussia employees actually live in Pennsylvania. Some of them are in New Jersey, some of them are in Delaware, and even a couple travel in from Maryland every now and again. And herein is the issue with the way the world divides itself up versus how the weather works, because the weather doesn't recognize boundaries and borders and everything else like that. What you need to be able to do is to be able to see things laid out on a map and then make your own selection, which is on the right hand side where we move to, mapping all of our employees at zip code level. And now I can just use a lasso tool to say, here are all the people in this vague area that you need to know about and contact. And this was the beginnings of our emergency response app. This was where it all started. So now I can produce a report that only gives me the people in a specific area, irrespective of there may be state codes or you know, office codes, or whether they were remote workers, office workers, or whatever. So already a big step forward in being able to respond to these events just by mapping our employees out. And this, by the way, I've given a screenshot here of North America. This is a global mapping system. So everybody in the world is mapped into their postcodes. What we also did here, just as an aside, again using geoanalytics, was we built in an audit function. So if someone's postcode or zip code doesn't match that in our geoanalytics package in our directory, we then take the next best thing, which would be city, and we map them to the center of the town or the city that they live in. If that doesn't work, the app actually raises a flag, and the internal built-in audit function says this many people have missing zip codes or they don't match, this many people have cities that don't match. So immediately, again, we're being able to identify the people within our community that we actually need to be more proactive with to ask them to update their details or check their details in Workday. Because if there is an emergency, we do want to make sure that we can be in touch with them. So this was the beginning. This is the start of our journey. You'll all be very familiar with this. Recent events. So very last day of the year, last year, 2019, China confirms a new coronavirus, COVID-19. 12 days later, we have the first fatality in China. 9 days after that, we have cases confirmed in Japan, South Korea, and Thailand. 1 day after that, we have our first case on US soil in Washington State. And 9 days after that, the World Health Organization declared a global health emergency. That all happened in 1 month. And I know that as time has gone on, the epicenter has moved from Asia through Europe. It's become North America. And I know now you guys are living with this in a very real way right now. So we saw the explosion of cases. And basically the whole world has changed, and how we reacted to that was super interesting. A lot of companies actually moving more quickly to protect their employees than governments and everything else were moving to lockdown countries and so on. Certainly, you know, there are many examples where even though there have been restrictions in one area, that it went further from a commercial perspective. And we are only just beginning now, I think, to see the ramifications of both these lockdown periods and the effect that it's going to have on the kind of global economy and commerce as a kind of a global businesses. Given the speed of the pandemic spread, what I wanted to do is just kind of focus in on one part, because the last few weeks have been extremely busy kind of monitoring a number of situations. But while there are many stories to tell, I just wanted to focus on one that really hit in Europe in a very real way. It was the first country that kind of we saw the big lockdowns come, and that was in Italy. So here is a screenshot actually from our COVID response app. And what you're seeing here is a summary. On the left-hand side, at the top there, you're seeing new cases and known cases and cases by the country. And at this point, we're just looking at Italy. This is a drill down dimension that we've got. So you're only seeing Italy. On the right-hand side, what we're doing here is mapping out where our employees are, and you can see the center of the employee. We've got a particular center around the northeastern part of Italy. That is our R&D center in Vicenza. Now, on the left-hand side of the north of Italy there's a number of dots around Milan. They are predominantly our pre-sales and our consulting guys. And this is important that we distinguish there are two groups of people. Now, what I can do within Qlik Sense, and you'll all be very familiar with this, is I can now look at by ex-team leader how many people we've got and where they are by using the tree map at the bottom left-hand side. So immediately I can see who's affected, what do they do. If we were to have them working from home, what impact is that going to have on both our employees and then our customers? So this is kind of the beginnings of being able to make those decisions. You are being able to now see, understand, and walk through the employee population in real time. Now, if I zoom into this very top part of Italy, as time went on, we actually got caught by the Italian government, actually reacted very quickly. And in the pink box, the Milanese employees actually were forced into lockdown very, very early. where the Vicenza employees in the darker box, in the darker circle there, they had no restriction and were still able to work in the office. Now, the difference or the distance between these two groups of people is really not very far. We're only talking, it takes half an hour by car to drive between these two circles. So as much as we need to be communicating with these Milanese employees who went into lockdown to say, please, whatever you do, don't leave your house. What do you need in terms of equipment? Do you have what you need to be able to do as much as you can from a work perspective? That's fine. But very quickly we realized, hang on a minute, the Vicenza employees also need to be communicated with because they're so close to this. They were really concerned, should we be going to the office? Should we not be going to the office? We're not in lockdown. What does it mean? These guys were getting quite anxious about the whole situation. And it took the authorities in Italy, I think, about a week between locking down Milan and then locking down Vicenza on the other side. However, we addressed that much more quickly, and we just, by this time, we were saying no offices globally for Qlik were being open. And this raises, from a human perspective, the need to be able to communicate with people as individuals, but also in cluster groups. And this is super important, to be able to send tailored communications that says, we're addressing your needs right now today, and addressing it to those affected, but also to those who may remain unaffected, but also need to know the current status. Because if this is an evolving situation, which we know it is, and the epicenter is moving around globally, we need to keep ahead of that, and we need to keep people informed. So there is a very real need to address different groups of people, and this is where the mapping part of Qlik has really helped us. As we continue down this journey, now actually Italy just came out of lockdown last week, so again, really topical to now talk about from a human capital perspective, from an employee perspective. We talk about the employee life cycle, hire to retire, onboarding to offboarding. And where we're sitting right now from an HR perspective is completely unprecedented. We're talking about a reboarding situation. How do we get our workforce back to wherever it is they work? So are we putting them back into an office? How safe is that environment? Can we get everybody into that environment as they were before? So don't underestimate, there is no playbook, there are no rules for this. Manufacturing industries need to make decisions about product output or volume of output, because they may not be able to put as many people into the environment as they need. Office workers like us, less of an issue for us to all be in the office all at the same time. And in fact, you know, many of you, I'm sure, are far more used to working remote and with customers and everything else. So it's just a very unprecedented time. And actually, sorry, before I move on, it also raises that question. Even though Qlik has still got its offices closed, our customers are now reopening. And the request is for our consultants to now be on site with them. Now, we have a closed office policy. What do we do with that? So again, data helps this whole situation in making decisions. Coming back to the path to recovery, we have within our people analytics, we've got the map on the left-hand side, and what we're doing here, I call a workforce network diagram. It is essentially an organizational chart laid out over a point layer map. Not too difficult. You connect the employee location with the manager location. And every line here, I don't know if you can see on your screens, every line here has an arrow which shows the reporting line from the employee into the leader. And this is just one of our functions. I believe that this is our R&D organization. It was either, yeah, no, this is our R&D organization. So typically R&D, finance, these sorts of functions within most businesses are co-located on site. But on the face of it, our finance function looks like it's quite used to being fairly split apart and reporting to remote leaders. So when we come to the decision about who goes back to the office, it would suggest in this case that they would probably be okay to stay as they are working from home. However, when we overlay then the number of people working in each location, on the right-hand side, now it shows a very, very different picture. And you can see that big orange blob over Sweden. It's pretty much where I'm standing right now, is our office in Lund. And now you get a different complexion as to, so that is a big center for our R&D function. And surely this should now be a priority to look at. What are all of these people doing, and should we get them back into the workplace? So even just overlaying extra data over the map here is taking us down a journey to ask ourselves some questions about how we address people going back to work. The problem with people, though, is that everybody is slightly different. So just because somebody works in R&D or just because somebody works in finance, does that make them more or less eligible to get back into the office or not? Don't know. But what I can say is that the human behavior and the characteristics that certain functions exhibit, and I make an apology in advance with this statement because the brush that I use is enormously big. I'm going to paint finance and R&D with a brush that says predominantly these guys are introverts. They sit at a desk, they look at a computer screen all day, they're either coding or using finance applications to pay invoices or produce finance Excel sheets or whatever it is. Quite introvert work. And these guys, as introverts, will be finding working from home extremely challenging. Their social interaction in the office is predicated on the fact that they can have a quick side conversation with somebody with no notice. I have a problem, I'm going to go speak to my manager and I'm going to go back to my desk and I'm going to fix it. These guys sitting at home on their own in isolation means that if they need to speak to somebody, they're needing to make a far more conscious effort to go out and connect with either the manager or colleague or somebody outside of their department to get an answer. And this is putting them under quite a lot of stress. We did an employee survey, so we know that the introvert type functions are finding it stressful and hard to keep their energy going because of that stress, because they're working in a home office environment. So you would then naturally think that these guys are candidates to go back to the office, co-locate again, and bring back into the normal life. I'm going to use a very big brush again to paint the sales organization as extroverts. So these guys are the ones that now feed off other people. These are the guys who draw energy from being in front of customers, being with their colleagues, bouncing ideas around. They naturally want to chat. And actually, the fact that they're all on Teams and Zoom and Skype and WebEx and whatever else, that's great to a degree, but these guys really feed off human contact. So in complete comparison to the introvert functions, maybe actually we need to get the extroverts together as well. So even there, there is no set rules or clear guidance as to kind of what works best for every company. Just want to give you some examples of the kinds of decisions that all companies are going to be needing to go through over the next few weeks as we get back to the workplace in Europe, and certainly in North America as they come out of their lockdowns into their yellow status, and as you guys come out the other side of your restrictions. These are all going to be questions that HR and their respective businesses are going to need to answer. How do we get the workplace back to work? Okay. Of course, analytics will also enable us to see some pretty straightforward information. So again, I've focused on North America here, the data path to recovery. So we can see here how many people are at risk ages for COVID-19. We can see how many people based in a location. We can then make some educated decisions based on this information to say, these guys actually, if we are unlocking North America, however, people need to continue to wear masks in the office, we don't even want to take that risk with our boomer population, so essentially the 55s and over population. We want to keep them home-based until that risk has passed, because actually the Gen X and the millennials and the iGen guys, they're far more able to cope with COVID should they develop it. Less risk, they have to wear a mask, but we're going to keep the boomers safe, tucked away at home. And again, this all plays into using the different pieces of data to make the decisions that businesses are going to need to do. Unfortunately as well, what we're also beginning to see, and I'm sure you guys have heard, there are some pretty disastrous on kind of downstream effects of this pandemic, where businesses are really now beginning to struggle. There's lots of independent traders who are facing bankruptcy because they can't keep trading. There are some pretty big organizations that are needing now to be considering how they want to continue doing business and how they preserve as much of what they have as they can, so that as we come out of COVID, and our chief executive, Mike Capone, says it so well, there was a beginning, there is a middle, and there will be an end. And how do you make sure that you are healthy at the end from a business perspective, to take your business forward from post-pandemic? Here you can see, and these are real views with fake data from some of the apps that we keep here in our people analytics department. So the one that's on the top is a 9-box grid. This is our talent review process. So as if you're in the unfortunate event, and we've seen many companies around the world needing to cut back on their staffing already, we have talent review data that's available so that we can identify and make sure that we understand if we get to that point, or if a company gets to that point, they can use talent review data to help educate and make some of those decisions. The colorful chart on the right hand side at the bottom here, Qlik, as you will all be very aware, is very values driven. So we also have values ratings for our employees, and this again informs, so who are the real values driven people within our organization? Who do we absolutely need to hold on to? Who do we need to keep in touch with? And this is all about, as we sit at home, making sure that we're making the right decisions around the communications piece. So are our managers prioritizing the right people to keep in touch? Have they got the right things? Are they being able to do what they need to do? How can we remove the barriers and obstacles and frustrations from them to keep them productive? And then the the screenshot on the left-hand side, the geographic cost analysis, this is an app that we built some time ago that again has come around in a post-COVID pandemic world, where we have been examining both market data and our own data to derive cost by country. So we can see, you know, and if a company needs to rationalize its workforce in some way, if they need to reduce costs because they've got a very high cost center in one country, now they need to look to offshore that in some way to another country to save money. This is the kind of app that they're going to need to be able to analyze and draw out that information and make those decisions. So very dollar driven. It feels very cold sometimes from an HR perspective to be in this mode, but actually for some companies this is going to prove essential for them to come out the other side as profitable and still in business. So this is the data path to survival. Final slide to show you today is the COVID response app. So these are a couple of screenshots of the actual app that I've been using at my end. So on the left-hand side, as I've said several times already, mapped with home location mapped down to postcode level or zip code level. I can take cuts of the company. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor on the screen, but we've got a remote flag. So whether people are remote based already, who will be used to working from home, or whether they were office based, we can see that segmentation of our employee population. These are the company functions. So we can highlight or look at a particular area of our business, be it finance or R&D or sales. Or we can look at countries and work locations. On the left hand, sorry, that was my mouse. There we go. On the left hand side here, we again have this drill down dimension to be able to look into countries. So when I look into the United States, it then gives me an expanded view by state, and then the COVID data updates by state as well. Which is super cool. And then at the bottom, employees by ex-team leader and department. The audit, and actually I've made a mistake here. On the bottom right-hand side, there is a box underneath the map that overlaps it, which gives us that data quality piece. You have X number of pieces of data missing. So you can see the result chart underneath. The table is saying other mobile phone, and there's a column there that just says it's all missing. That's because I deleted them all out for the sake of the presentation. But the app is telling me that we've got data quality issues. Now moving up to the top right-hand side, I've drawn a box around a really cool feature that one of our pre-sales guys worked on for me. And we actually have built into Qlik the ability to email people now. So as I get to these data quality issues, I can isolate all the people with a missing phone number, and I can now create an email directly from Qlik and send it to those guys on a BCC saying, everybody who's receiving this email, please could you go into Workday and update your phone number. This is also the tool that I was using in the previous example where we were looking in Italy at the two groups of people between Milan and Vicenza. So very easy for me to highlight them on the map, draw a lasso or a circle around them, and have an email template that we've been asked to send, and send it directly from the app, lands directly into their inbox. So they're getting very tailored information and communications from HR on the situation that we're going through. So these are just a few views from the COVID. So I've taken you on a little bit of a journey from typically how we report and what that means from an emergency response perspective and how to handle human capital in a crisis, all the way through to these very specific use cases around COVID. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for your time and for your listening as well. And I'd like to hand that back now to Eduardo.
Thank you very, very much, Tom. Outstanding. How beautiful, and team, to have the opportunity to talk to a senior HR executive that uses analytics to run his business. Imagine if we can find the Tom Ricks from our customers and have this kind of conversation and show them how we can help. Tom has the luxury of working out of Lund, so he has a few people to help him develop these applications in the R&D team. Our customers in Latin America have you guys, our partners, to do what the R&D team does for Tom in Lund. So it's critical for us to be able to identify the Toms in our customers and have this kind of data-driven discussion and be able to show how we can help not only with a tool, but applications that help them automate their job. For the teams that are participating in the hackathon, I hope you guys got some tips here and that can help you with ideas on what to do, what to include in your applications. Maybe it's going to be a little more difficult for you because I think we raised the bar. What Tom presented, I feel like it's outstanding. It's really good. And if you guys can think about ideas, I think that's going to be outstanding. But regardless, the whole idea of doing this hackathon, and Jimena, thanks again for the idea, great idea, and I hope you enjoy seeing how Qlik is using. The whole idea is really for you guys to have something to approach our customers, a reason to get in touch with the customers and say, hey, Mr. Customer, you're going back to work now, I can help you. And present something similar to this. We're gonna make this recording available, but I'm very anxious to see what is coming from this hackathon. I'm sure you guys are very creative. Everything done by our partners in Latin America is always top class. So I'm sure we're gonna see some great applications, some great ideas, and anxious to see the team that's gonna win and present to Mike Capone and Tom. Tom will be with us in that presentation as well. We invited him. So thanks a lot for participating in this call. Really appreciate. I hope you enjoyed. And again, Tom, thank you very much. This was really outstanding. In the name of the LATAM team, I really thank you for taking the time late night in Sweden to go through this presentation to us.
Thanks, Eduardo. Very welcome, and good luck to all of you as you start to develop. I am really keen to see the ideas that come out. So thank you all for your time too.